Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to Level Up, and this is session 70. And we're here today with me, Wojtek, Darek, and our special guest, Scott Robertson. Hi, Scott.
Hi. Hi, all. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining. We're really happy to have Scott today. So this is a 70th session, so it's a kind of a special event for us because not only are we together with the whole team again, but we have Scott, who is kind of, for us, the father of Level Up.
Yeah.
The reason that we have that
is
because... No? Oh, well, let me just tell you then.
That's good news to me. That's cool.
Yeah, the reason that we're really happy to have Scott is not only because he's a great artist, but also because he's been doing a lot of, helping the community kind of stuff, and his spirit is very similar to what we had in mind when we started Level Up. So it's really great to have him on board. He's done a lot of stuff. I'm sure you know, most of you know about him, but I'm gonna go through some of his work and tell you about his websites and stuff first before we give the voice to him. So Scott Robertson is a concept artist, from America, and he's pretty well known for his transportation design work, but for concept art in general. He worked on movies like Minority Report, and he did a lot of educational DVDs for the Gnomon Workshop. And yep. And actually, if you want to check out more about Scott, I'll just quickly give you a couple of URLs because he has a lot of stuff that you can go through. First of all, he's got his website called thecargocollective.com. I hope I'm saying that right.
I think it's drawthrough.com.
Yeah, it's just drawthrough. I just host it on Cargo because I like the style of their template.
Right. Okay. My bad. So drawthrough. And then also you have Scott Robertson Workshops. We might talk a little bit more about that later. .com. And of course, check out his YouTube channel, which is called Scott Robertson Design, where you have a ton of videos. We have it on the Level Up website, so you can actually find it there if you don't know the URL. But anyway, enough. I'll just pass the voice to Scott because he has a lot of stuff for us today, and I don't want to take up too much of his time. So, Scott, it's all yours.
Okay. Well, thanks again for having me on. And I see we talked yesterday. Let's see. Let me hide that. Go to screen share.
Guys, if you have any questions to Scott, in the meantime, Darek will make sure to pick those up from chat. And later, during the Q&A phase of this session, we will try to cover them. So make sure to post them to the chat right now, if you have any. So,
yeah, we talked yesterday about doing more Q&A in this session because I have like 150 videos or something on my YouTube channel, and so many books and things. We thought what was unique about this event and doing this dialogue was the fact that we could do more Q&A than focused on demos that already exist in sort of a better format anyway. So I think the unique thing about live events is that you all can ask questions. I can answer them, so we have a nice dialogue. And then I've already read all the questions that were posted to the Facebook page, so I've queued up a few things to help explain some of those. But I think we usually start with a little portfolio show. Is that right? For
first, just your current work, what you are doing as a professional, and then we really like to go back a little bit and see where do you come from. Where is what was your basically creative? What was your journey?
Okay. Well, here's a brief history. I've been teaching for about 20 years via my own workshops around the world, and of course, Art Center College of Design. I've either authored or co-authored now about 13 books on drawing, rendering, and design. I've done entertainment design for movies and video games. I've done product design, actually earlier in my career when I left Art Center. So it was like wheelchairs, durable medical goods, sporting goods, that sort of thing. And transportation design, of course. That was actually my major, was product design and transportation, but my specialty was more transportation. I've done toy design and some theme park design. I'm tired already.
I don't think so.
YouTube channel came out as sort of an extension of what I was doing, teaching. Also, that came out of an extension of doing the Gnomon Workshop videos, the books, and I thought it would be fun to put together a channel where I shared some of that content, put up a free tutorial every so often. Well, I used to do them like every Friday, and now I haven't as much.
Oh,
So
I'm having a deja vu here.
Yeah, it's an old screen grab of mine. I think now I'm almost up to 3 million views, which is kind of cool. So
Wow, that's amazing.
And
so your series was called Free Tutorial Friday? That was it,
yeah, Free
right?
Tutorial Friday. It was really just to remind me to do it every week.
But it worked. It
Yeah,
worked.
yeah.
I waited for every video, so I miss those, really.
I miss doing them a little bit, but I'm so busy with this big job that I haven't really had the time. It takes a lot of coordination and planning to do those. I should do more of the interviews because those are actually pretty quick and easy to do.
Yeah, that's what we're
Those are the
doing.
books. When did we start? Design Studio Press. Technically, we started in 2001, and our first book came out in March 2003, which was Concept Design 1, that one on the upper left. That was our very first book. And these are the books that I've contributed to with Design Studio Press. Some of them more than others, obviously. Like Skillful Huntsman was just coordinating the project, writing the structure of the class, since that's really documentation of 3 amazing students that I had at Art Center. And in the future is all student work. So again, coordinated the book, contributed some text. Well, I have a little sketchbook in the far right, of course, is all mine. And then there's, a variety of things. Anyway, probably the first 2 books I should have done when I started this company was How to Draw and How to Render. But you can see they're at the end of this. These are all in sequence. So 10 years late getting them done, but that's all right.
So these were planned from the very beginning of Design Studio Press?
Yeah, so Concept Design 1, the blue and white one, upper left, that was the very first book.
Yeah.
And like How to Render for Design Studio Press is maybe like book number 65. I think we have 70 books now in print, and we have another 20 books in development.
Wow.
So I think we have 12 books coming out between now and October. And we are focusing, I'd say, a little bit more now on education, which is good. We'll have quite a variety of educational books coming with some amazing instructors. So sort of building on that How to Draw, How to Render sequence. So hopefully more of that.
These are just incredible educational books. I have both of those, and I cannot stress it enough how good they are. This knowledge was partly available in your Gnomon videos, I think.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, not quite as probably as structured or organized. But I like both of those formats. I like books and I like videos. I think they both do things very well. I think the combination is really like the most powerful thing.
And that's what you did, right? You have embedded videos of you drawing.
Yeah. The book have videos. Yeah, I think How to Draw has about 10 hours of free video. How to Render has about 22 hours. I think 40 videos. So
I love the concept you have implemented, like a multimedia experience into the book, and you can actually access that with your iPad or Android device, which is just outstanding and really impressive. And
if you're a geek, you can do that, or you can just go to the website. So anyway, that's just really fun, and we got to then put in the little pop-up 3D models, which we have in How to Draw. Technically speaking, you don't, for the educational content, you can just go to the website and there's the whole database listed. So you access it either way.
All right. So these are your...
Yeah, these are I pulled some pieces from past books and from past projects. So you'll see these will just cruise on by as we're chatting to show some portfolio work. But since all this work is already in books and most of it's on my website, I sped this up a little bit. And I've been very fortunate in that I've had the opportunity to work on a lot of different projects. from real automotive projects. Well, it's still on the conceptual side, I would say, not so much production, but toys, video games, real vehicles, product design. Of course, the books and starting that company. So I do a lot of graphic design work with that, copy editing, putting together essentially presentation books for a lot of things. So I've been very fortunate in that. And I guess in a lot of cases, I've just sort of, I was a little bit bored with traditional work. I've always been very entrepreneurial. So, that was a fun thing, was to go and create that in order to sort of created my own job in a way. And then education, I've always loved education. That's been primarily what I've done, actually. So I've been out of school since 25 years this month, almost to the day. And my first 5 years were spent up in San Francisco. Neville Page and I opened a studio right after graduating from Art Center, a consulting firm. So we did that in summer of 90. And then January 95, started teaching at Art Center Europe. So, the bulk of my career has actually been education, and then on the side, a little bit of freelance work.
Nice.
I don't think there is a handful of people with that much experience teaching now, so that's just outstanding. That we weren't really. I don't think I were born when you have established the studio with Neville, so that's just.
Thanks for making me feel. Yeah.
I did it well, right? I did it well.
Now I feel like it's justified, I guess.
But Wojtek, you probably weren't even in the plans, by the way.
I think that's what happened.
That is really impressive when you look all of your pictures and works. It's basically how wide spectrum of techniques you use and how do you apply them all the time, like from normal traditional drawing to digital painting and 3D, which is really impressive. And actually, I have a question right now to you, because some of the people are already posting it regarding your technique and workflow, even if you cover it a lot in your tutorials. Like, what's exactly the stuff that really keeps you going right now in terms of technique? What do you like to use right now? What's the best tool that you really like, or if you have any favorite one?
It's interesting because if you're sort of from the illustration world, there's always a lot of discussion and asking about technique and materials and methods. And if you come from the industrial design world, which is more my background, that's really never a question. It's what's the best tool to communicate what you're interested in or curious, or what's the job. And so you just pick the tools that make the most sense. So from my perspective, I never really think about it as art. And I don't think about it as technique so much. I work with all the tools, and so really I just try to pick the best tool that works for whatever the project is at the moment. So let's say I wanted to do something that was really organic, I might work with a graphite pencil if I was working traditionally, because I know if I was working with a Sharpie pen, it would be really difficult to have any sort of subtlety in the technique where I would start to discover things in the drawing. That wouldn't be the case. So, but if I was going to do something mechanical, I might use a pen and not the graphite. So I usually pick my technique based on the subject matter. And if I'm doing something that's very engineering based, I might jump in and actually start in a 3D program and then do a quick render and then go into Photoshop and do the styling and paint back over the top.
All right.
I don't know if was that the question? I don't even know.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a thing that people should try to think about as well when they're working professionally, to kind of know which technique to use when is very important. Definitely when speed is an issue as well, or trying to be effective. Like when I work with directors, often they want to see stuff in 3D, so they're actually able to move the camera around, in scenes and stuff, so you're not stuck to fixed drawing.
What's the most important thing is you need to be proficient at doing everything if you want to work. You want to work in the concept design world, because you might go to a studio, like say, this is the classic story of like Ryan Church and Fang going up to work on Star Wars, And I go up to work on that, and the way that George likes to see everything is he likes to see it all in a marker sketch. And if you were like only a digital person and you didn't know how to use markers, well, sorry, pack it up. You had your opportunity, but now you've missed it because you couldn't adapt. So
Exactly.
I think you need to be proficient at everything, because as you join different design teams or you do different freelance jobs, there might already be that the technique might be dictated to the team.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
you'd hate to miss out on your dream job because you weren't proficient enough in a variety of techniques.
Yeah, and if it happens that you join and you just feel you don't really know that tool, it's like the way just to move your ass and actually work on it, right? And learn it as fast as you can. Because as you said, you need to adapt somehow. It's not really,
Yeah.
being comfortable for you, but it's not about being comfortable in this work, right?
Yeah, of course, you're not going to let the opportunity go. You're just going to go back that first night once you realize what it's all about and just,
Yeah.
draw all night with markers. So, but it's a lot nicer if you go in and having already established,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I think, the thing that I always come back to that my students always can fall back on is if they have strong foundation skills, they can work with any tool.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, because
So
they
what's been
design
going on
scenes. And, yeah.
past
Sorry.
project. Some sketches, that's the bike stuff I did for Minority Report.
Nice.
So those are like some of the very first digital renderings that I had done in Photoshop, like sort of trying to do photoreal.
Please don't say trying.
Well, you can see there's some rough patches in there. These are a photograph of all the components. So this is production work for Kestrel. And that was, let's see if I can go back. If it'll let me break in. No. Anyway, the components were photographed, and let's see if I can slow that. So I can just, since we're just talking about technique, let me just go here for a sec. Okay. So let's just start here. This one's all Photoshop. This one's a photograph for the components, and then everything that's red is the proposed design direction, and that's all Photoshop. And then this one is a clay helmet. So this is automotive clay that I would sculpt half of a model, and then I would put it on a first surface mirror, if I had one, or a regular mirror, take a photograph, and then I would refine it a little bit inside Photoshop, like get rid of the seam between. These are also clay helmets. Because I was technically trained as a transportation designer, so I used automotive clay, and I would sculpt these helmets out of clay. Then I would even paint them if it was a finished direction. So this is actually probably painted. Let's see if there's a good shot here. Like you can see maybe up in here a little bit. This is clay as well. And then I would paint it all this silver, and then I would go back with a brush, and I would paint it kind of a dark gray metallic in there to indicate the foam. And then I would take a black Sharpie pen and I would stipple it inside there to make it look like that foam material. And then I would colorize it in Photoshop after, and then composite the poster. So you can see there's all different, mediums combined. This is actually 3D up here, and then this is a traditional sketch and a Photoshop rendering. So that's 3D, and this is 2D. And this was from my Hot Wheel that I did. And then this is all 3D. So, it's a variety. And there were marker sketches earlier, so there's a big variety. This is some abstract stuff. I loaded up this case study. We can talk about this a little bit later. And this would be using 3D tools as a sketching medium, basically, and the power of abstraction. Same sort of thing with this project I did for Columbia Sportswear a while ago.
This is all 3D, right?
3D, yes. I also, lately, in the last couple of years, I've been doing some software development. So I've been working with Sketchbook Pro and trying to refine their perspective drawing tools a little bit. And we're still pushing forward with that project, so there's still cool stuff coming. I also work a lot with Modo. Modo is the 3D program I use most of the time, and so I've been helping them working back and forth, like beta testing, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, you are also in the like a starting splash page, your scene you have created on, I think, Moto 801.
Yeah, the latest one. Yeah, I gave them that model for people to, to use and have and play with and do different renderings with, etc.
Yeah.
So, just because it was fun. This was the last book I did that came out last November, end of last year, and to be honest, that's my last book for a while. I've taken a break from doing books, so no more books for me for a while I'm on this big other job. And then workshops. I'm also taking a break from doing workshops. So no more teaching for now. So no more tutorials, no more books, no more workshops. So,
for a while. Just for a while.
Yeah, I used to do a series of workshops as an example in Taiwan. Went back there a couple of times. There's some of my contact info. If you want to know if I do start doing books again, this is where you can find me.
That's great. So what about how to design? I know that this was planned, right?
Originally I had thought, okay, I should put out all 3 books together in one set. Okay? And that's when I thought each book would be around, 128 to 160 pages. But as we got started on how to draw, it quickly became obvious that it was going to be more than that, and it was going to take longer. So we decided to release them in sequence. And I always kind of thought, as a designer, being logical, I always thought that how to design should have been first, because until you have something to design, you don't really have anything to draw. Because my books aren't really about drawing from observation or drawing like typical illustrator. It's more about building models. So I always thought, well, unless you have some, you work on your imagination first and you have a good idea, there's really nothing to draw. So, but as we pitched it to our sales reps for Design Studio Press and that sort of stuff, they said, no, everybody thinks you should start with draw. So I did. So I did draw first. Then render was logical after that. So I did that, and that ended up being like 280 pages or something ridiculous.
These are huge.
And too many pages. And then I was tired. So after that one, the end of last year, because I did those 2 back to back, I needed a break. So I put how to design. I shelved it for now. So if my big project goes poorly, I will get back to it faster. So
there you go. I'm crossing my fingers for that. Can't wait.
It will happen. It will happen someday, I think.
Okay.
But for now, yeah, no more books for now.
Okay. We are happy from these 2 really packed and huge Bibles of knowledge, really. So it's really great to have those.
It's like everything I taught for 20 years put into those 2 books, plus the total of like 30 videos that go with them, plus all the free stuff on the YouTube channel. I mean, I think there's enough there for people to practice for the next, 5 years or something.
Yeah. Exactly. So guys, if you don't have these books, you have to get them, because these are really describing the most fundamental subjects in the drawing and design and understanding of perspective, camera lenses, materials, physics, and it's really great. So make sure to get those on.
Thanks for that. I mean, it just came out in Korean and Japanese, and will soon be out in Chinese. How to draw, and then how to render is currently being translated into those same languages.
Yeah, it's a must-have, totally. So what do we have next? I think
you guys forced me to show oldies, right?
Oh yeah, but I think
you better get that out of the way. All right, so there's a little like personal history interwoven into these old images I found. I couldn't find that many, but anyway, hopefully this is enough. So let's go back into why I probably liked cars. So that's me at age, probably 14, I think 14, 15, and that was the first car that I designed and built. And it was all like made like a wood strip canoe, if you know how those are made. So it's all hollow inside. There's a big wood block up here at the front, a wood block at the end, and then there's a little floorboard in here that's, you know, kind of thick that has all the components attached to it, like the brake pedal, the steering column, all that sort of thing. And there's a lot of little tiny strips of wood that you glue around bulkheads, and then you put fiberglass around the outside and on the inside, and then you sand it all perfectly smooth and give it automotive paint and sand that for, you know, hours and hours. I think I had 500 hours into this car. And
crazy.
Yeah,
How
it was
old
fun.
were you back then?
14.
14.
Yeah, 14. Because I grew up. My first love was, my dad was an artist. He was an illustrator, and he went to Art Center in the early '60s. And but I grew up building models, so modeling and building things was probably my first, my first real passion and curiosity. And this soapbox derby racing is what it's called. That grew out of that, building models. And my dad was never like a car guy in the context of engines and that sort of thing. So these things just coast. And he actually did soapbox derby racing when he was a kid. So I grew up in Oregon, and then there was an amazing permanent track in Salem, which is the capital. They had this track. I don't know how long they are, but it's basically just a big steep hill, and there were 3 lanes, and you race down. And then you're in there like this. This is how you are inside.
So did you actually race in that? And if yes, did you break anything?
No, I did actually crash once, not in this car, but a different car. And I did get a concussion, so that wasn't very much.
Okay.
My brake failed, and I went off the end of the track through a big stack of tires, and I went through the tires, and they all shot up in the air, and I hit a big parking log, one of the parking lots.
Yeah, I mean, that looks crazy dangerous. It looks really cool, but it looks so dangerous. It's like a coffin on wheels, basically.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm not going to go anywhere. So you go about 35 miles an hour at the bottom of the hill, probably.
Wow.
We're 7 feet long. Anyway, you have to. And my brother and I, we were, I guess at the time, flexible and probably a little pigeon-toed because your feet are way up here, and there's a brake pedal up. But this is how you have to push on it. You have to twist your foot, so it's pigeon-toes. Your leg goes up and over the axle here. It's a solid axle. Right here, it goes all the way through. Your feet go up and over that, and your feet are up here. And then the worst thing is, on a really sunny day, this is a piece of steel, and it gets really hot, and your legs are right on top of it. And it's, very unpleasant. So the race, though, is really fast. So you get in there, you do your race, you get right out. So I mean, you don't have to stay in there long.
If you reach the
the crazy thing is, in this case, your shoulders are right here, so they have to squeeze together. And then in a different style car was this one. This is my brother's car, and I designed it. And your shoulders are actually down here, a totally different position. So, which is this. So your shoulders are way down here in those side blisters. And so
blisters is what you'll get.
Yeah, exactly.
So basically you couldn't work out, man. You couldn't work out.
Yeah. But this is when I really got into aerodynamics, actually, because a lot of the guys up in the Northwest, their families that would do this, they were up in Seattle. They were a lot of Boeing engineers, and so they would always, at each rally we'd go and each race, they would explain aerodynamics to me. And so we used to do stuff like put little strips of tape here at the widest part of the car and just past that to try and trip the laminar flow back onto the tail of the car to improve the aerodynamics. So there are all sorts of little things we used to do. And then this one was all about decreasing the frontal area. So it was all designed in front view, and so it's a big diamond shape. Whereas if you looked at a car like this, right, it would be a big ellipse, and the diamond had less frontal area. So I don't have a good front view of it, but you can kind of get a sense of the cross section right through here.
Yeah.
And this is foam. That thing would open. There's a little hidden hinge in there. Super fun though. This was the easiest car to build. There's actually pieces of really thin plywood that's just twisted down each side. And this was, of course, my dad was an artist, so of course my brother's car was painted like a rainbow trout. So it's pretty funny. Okay, and then I have some Art Center work. Let's see, before that I went to Oregon State University before I went to Art Center, and I used to row. a lot. And I was also in the illustration department, so I was doing illustrations. So this is a pencil drawing, probably drawn from a photograph at the time. Here's a little color studies. You know, like the typical illustration assignment where you do a black and white, then you do complements, and then you do, well, these are complements. Well, actually, they both are. But you try to make, you know, those jerseys, make them vibrate against that magenta. Mm-hmm. So more like a color theory assignment. Then acrylic, yeah. Graphite on the left, acrylic for both on the right. They're about 18 by 24 inches.
Okay.
Or like, that's what, like A2 size.
There's a quick question to relating the models you have built at 14. So all that you learned from your father, basically.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He and I he taught me a lot about drawing, and taught me a lot about, you know, building models. So yeah, it was great childhood to have that level of support. Here's a drawing I did for my entrance portfolio. Not one of my designs, obviously, just a drawing from observation. Here's an original car. This thing is really funny. Nobody has seen this. So this is about 28 years old, I think, because this would have been when I applied for Art Center, which was 87. Actually, I applied in 86, I think. So this was some funny, like, three-wheeler, I think. Maybe three, or just narrow at the back. But it was a hybrid. So here it was, it had, let's see, it had an engine, it had a generator, it had a flywheel, and it had electric motors at each wheel. So that was 28 years ago. Not much has changed, actually, except the cars look better. Here's a little plan view drawing. Here's a little airflow study. And these are funny because these were drawn, the ink was drawn by hand on like vellum. And then this, all the blue, is actually that like old Zipatone color adhesive sheet, like tinted adhesive sheet, like you know, you'd put on your shelves in your kitchen, kind of like that. And so you put it down, and then you take an X-Acto knife and you cut out all the shapes.
Cut it out. Okay.
And then you pull it out. So it's this is probably, that's Zipatone, probably, all these colors. So it's all like colored film that's glued in there. This is my very, very first attempt at markers and airbrush.
Nice. So that's how everything basically started, with vehicles, cars, all related to it and inspired by cars.
Here. Yeah, started there. And then I had the artistic ability because my dad teaching me how to draw. And then I knew about Art Center because of him. He was in illustration, but I knew about the school, and that's what helped me, you know, to know that I could go there and put a portfolio together. Well, not that I could get in, but that I knew about the school, because so many people growing up, especially I grew up in the country in Oregon. Right, if he hadn't gone there, I probably would have never known about the school, because you know, there's just at that time no internet, right? So there's no internet. I didn't travel that much. So the town I grew up in was 1,600 people. My high school only had 4 grade levels. Total school population was like 250. And my graduating class from high school was only 56. So not a lot of exposure to the rest of the world. With no internet, small farming community area of Oregon. So thankfully, you know, because he went there, I knew about the school. So those are some pieces from my portfolio. Here's a couple more drawings. I think these were drawn I actually made, couldn't find a picture of it, but I made like a stringer model, like a 1/10 scale model, and cut out plywood. And then I think this is how that drawing was done. I was either looking at the picture of it, or I projected the picture and traced over and then added all the interior bits. So pencil sketch.
So what were the tasks that your father gave you? It was always something like the car related, something that you needed to think also about the function of the stuff, showing it how it looks inside and what the design is, or you were just typical draw everything, my son?
No, he never pushed me at all. It was always, you know, the way that he got me into drawing was he would just give me a sketchbook each year at Christmas, right? And all it would say on the front was "fill it up," and that was it. So
it was somehow like an order.
yeah, fill it up, and that was it. And so, you know, as I would draw more, if I wanted to, then I would go to him with questions. But it was always me coming to him asking if, you know, if I had a question. And then he would go and explain it to me, like how ellipses worked and that sort of thing. And I think it must have been one of those times when I was in high school and I was asking about how, you know, to draw wheels or something probably. He pulled out a three-ring binder that had all of his perspective coursework from when he was at Art Center. And so I actually went through and did all the exercises. You know, it was like 14 weeks of class, and every week they do new exercises. And I had all of his constructions. And so I went back and I actually did all those constructions before I went to Art Center. So, and it turns out when I went to Art Center, that teacher was still teaching. He was still teaching the same things. And I was like, oh, this is going to be awesome because I've already done all the work, right? So I was like, I've already done all the work for sure. It's an easy A. I'm not going to have to worry about this one. And wouldn't you know it, there were two teachers teaching perspective, and I got the other guy. So I had to do all new stuff my first term at Art Center. I didn't get to use any of the, I mean, I got to use all the knowledge, but I didn't get to use, actually done like all the real lessons, and it hadn't changed. So, oh well, it's probably meant to be that way.
So the red car you have showed us, the one at the bottom that was drawn by you, designed as an application to Art Center. That's what I understood from that, right?
Right.
That was just an application. So during your high school and your childhood, basically, how did you know what are the ingredients of the Art Center student? You just listened to your father who knew that, or you have had a knowledge of...
I went for a visit there. So I knew, the only thing that I knew from my dad was about the school. And I think if he had to do it over again, he might have been an industrial designer, because he also used to design the homes we lived in, and we used to go build them as a family project. So, you know, so he was really interested in design in addition to illustration. And he always thought that was cool what the industrial design students did in that department. And so he had suggested, listen, if you really want to know about it and you need to put together a portfolio to get in, you should go visit the school, right? Because I was still on the West Coast. It's not that big a deal. So I did a road trip. At the time, I was going to school at Oregon State University, which is where I started my education after high school. And I was mostly rowing, but I was also trying to do other things to see if there's anything that I liked more than design and illustration. And there wasn't, and so I decided, okay, I've been at Oregon State for 2 years. I should get a portfolio together the summer after my second year and try to apply to go to Art Center. And so that summer, took a road trip and went to Art Center and then met with an admissions counselor, and they give you a tour of the school and tell you what they're looking for in their portfolio, basically.
Then,
the same that's online. And then I went away for the summer and took their guidelines about what they were looking for, and I put together this portfolio over the summer, and actually I think into the fall a little bit. And I was in the beginning of my junior year at Oregon State when I submitted my portfolio, and then I got into Art Center, so I started in January. So it was halfway through a normal academic year, but Art Center Industrial Design, they start a new program, starts 3 times a year. And they graduate 3 classes a year. So you can start and stop anytime you want. So that's pretty nice. I didn't have to wait all the way until the next fall.
So you started right away, yeah.
Yeah, so I got accepted. Fortunately, I got a scholarship. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to afford to go. And that was it. So head down to LA and breathe some smog.
Oh yeah, the traffic.
For the first time in my life that really hurts your lungs, and that sucks. And so, you know, stop all exercise and just work on design.
Nice.
That's amazing. That's outstanding. You have showed us these, as we know. You didn't really showcased your portfolio before, like the one you just showed us. So this is really outstanding.
That's the before, and that was the after. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I think that's kind of how it all started. You know,
So it's amazing. It's amazing to see how like you tried at least. I think you just managed to be prepared at everything you wanted. Like, and when we see like today's session is really well structured. So you just help us a lot right now. But I think I'm just looking at the chat. Some of the people are asking the question about functionality of your designs and what was the main challenge when you started actually designing like your stuff, your work? Was it like a shape language or something that is more connected to actually working of the actual product or the car or vehicle?
Yeah, I think it's more function first. Like this car, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
This car, which designed when I was like 14, had a lot of problem solving that went into it. It wasn't great aerodynamically. It's not a great aerodynamic shape at all. But what it did was, like, this is the very traditional car. I don't have a 3/4 view, but in top view, it's basically a teardrop, right? So it's very aerodynamic, like with the widest point right about here. And it really, tapers to a vertical fin in the back, and this is a vertical ellipse here. It's very much a big aerodynamic, teardrop.
Yeah.
Then this was the first car that had this kind of horizontal front, and this did two things. We learned that when you set up a car, there's at the top of the hill, there's a little ramp, and there's a vertical gate that's about 3 inches wide. And the nose of your car rests against a little vertical gate. And then it drops down and your car starts rolling. Mm-hmm. Well, with the old car like this, right, which has a very round nose, that has to be centered on the lane, right? You couldn't move it left or right, otherwise it wouldn't hit the gate. Mm-hmm. But with this car, because it's straight across the front, we could put the gate way over here on this corner. Oh, okay. And then we could be in a different position at the starting point. Mm-hmm. And because it's just friction, right, from both the air and the rolling resistance, if you could reduce the friction, you could gain an advantage. So if we could move our car to a different position at the starting gate, we wouldn't have to steer the car to get to one side of the lane or the other. Because the worst thing you can do when you start and you're going very, very slow is turn your wheels, because they'll increase the friction on the axle. So by moving our car left and right, we could actually end up where we wanted to be, like 50 feet down the track without steering. So that was a huge advantage. They subsequently outlawed this 2 years later. So then the other one was that in this case, if imagine you're in the car, you're like this, right? You can just see, and you look out this little tiny crack between the helmet and this foam. And when you look down, and if a car has this kind of side view, where you see down the track is like way down the track. So steering becomes difficult, right? You're having to predict, where you are in the lane, even though you can't see your wheels. Well, this car, I could actually see my wheels. So if you could put your wheels on a stripe, because they have painted stripes in the lanes, the stripes are smoother than the asphalt. And so if you could put your tire on there, you would actually go faster. So because I could see my tires, I could also see the stripe. And so I could actually drive and put the wheels on the stripe much more effectively than you could in a car like this. So this form is completely derived from the function of first wanting to go more left and right on the starting gate, and two, wanting to increase the visibility. But that was kind of just like a happy accident, the byproduct of that. So, and you can see we retained that even here. We went, as wide as the rules would allow, which was like 16 inches. And then this is even more diagonal here, so you can see the wheels even better out of this spot. So I think those were big advantages. It was less aerodynamic, but I could drive it more accurately, and it had less, and it had freedom to move it on the starting gate. So that all came out of design, right? That all came out of function.
So this is what you have been figuring out at 14.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, so I think, but that comes out of building models, right? Like figuring out how to build things. So I'd say mostly out of function, and then later the styling comes along, but it's still with a mindset of functionality. You know, everything's styled for the project, whatever that project is. But I would never do in this sort of thing. It'd never be form first. It would always be, you know, it's racing, so it's all about function.
It's amazing, man. Really amazing.
I think we can move to the Q&A session section of our session right now. So we have a couple of questions prepared from the poll we have created on the Facebook event page. People that joined the event voted on the questions. So we are actually going through them from the most voted one to the least voted one. We will see how many of those we can cover. So yeah, Jonas, I think you have the first question prepared. So
yep. So the most I'm gonna try to read out the typos. So pardon if I just read it literally. So the first question is, Scott, how would you know when a design is successful, or how do you know when your design is successful?
Well, I think there's a lot of variables in that question. So I'll probably have to give a couple of different answers, depending what type of project it is. If it's function-based, right, then of course it passes some engineering standard, and it all works, right? But most of the things we do on the concept side really has a big element of style, and style is very, very subjective. So trying to gauge whether or not the style of something, right, is successful is much more difficult. And I would probably, let me see if I actually have something here as part of the styling lecture at the end. I have a slide. I'm going to jump ahead to that slide. Do I still have the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that should pop up in a minute. So what I tried to do when I was teaching at Art Center was, you know, I had this question a lot from my students. This is not an uncommon question. You know, what makes a successful design, or how do I know something looks cool? It's kind of a variation on that, especially if you're talking about styling. And you know, engineering is easy because you have numbers, you have math, you have a stress test or something. You can always just build it and break it. And if you build it and it doesn't break and it performs well, you're successful. But with styling and design, you don't really have that. You have more of a feeling. And of course, the simple thing is you do a bunch of work and you show it to someone. You're a production designer, director, studio chief, and they say, yeah, that looks good. Okay, well, that you could say is successful. But you need somebody else then to qualify it. And what would be really nice is if you had a way that you could qualify the design as being on the right direction, right? You kind of want to have a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling that this thing's going to be successful before you show it to the person you work for, right? Yeah. Whether that's freelance client or your immediate studio boss, that sort of thing. So I tried to come up with this idea of some topics, and that's what this list is on screen, this proximity-based styling opportunities, a way to go through and check and see if the thing you've designed has the elements, you know, if you've done the best you could with each element that makes up that object. So for instance, proximity means distance, right? So this is all based on how far away you are from an object. And when I'm far away from an object, whether it's a building or a character or a vehicle, right, I see the silhouette quite strongly. I can see the proportions and I see the stance. And then I can make I can evaluate that, and I can say, yes, those three topics on number one, those are working. Or I think I could have a better silhouette. Or, you know, I think if I change the way it's leaning, it would have a more interesting stance. So it's a way for you with a client to go through a list and check off these things. So I kind of think of these as gates. And these are roughly in order as you walk closer to an object, what you see next. But they don't have to be in this order. Because if we walk into an environment, let's say that we see something, we can never see it from a distance, like it's only seen in a store or something, or let's say it's a shoe. Well, all the shoes have basically the same silhouette, right? Let's say it's a running shoe or, you know, tennis shoe, they're all basically the same. So the proportion in stance and silhouette isn't the most important. What's probably the most important are things like the value graphics, those sorts of things. So that you could switch the order of these is my point. So this was a way to see and try to answer the first question, which is how would you know when a design is successful? Well, if it's styling-based question or even artwork related, I would do a list like this. And then I would sit down with my client, and this list is fantastic to actually educate clients that are maybe you're working with a whole bunch of engineers, right? And they're trying to now do styling on top of the thing that they've created that works really great but just looks awful. And you now need to make that look better and presentable to the rest of the world. Well, you know, you can't have a conversation with those people because that's not where their headspace is. So you need to have things, topics. And so this is a way to actually try to, let's say, structure a discussion on a very subjective subject like styling. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. But something I'm wondering is, like, don't we get into the same question? I mean, I think some people get into the same question when they break this down. Like, when you say silhouette, proportion, stance, I think some people, again, are wondering what makes a cool silhouette, what makes a cool proportion. Like, how do we actually define, or how do we, you know, explain what we feel when something looks good or cool, regardless of what exactly we're talking about?
So usually you do that with visual benchmarking, right? So for instance, if I take, let's take another analogy out of the engineering world. Let's say some guys are going to package up a new sports car, right? I mean, when I say package, they're going to decide where's the engine go, where do the people go, that sort of thing. And what they do is they'll go buy the competitor's car, okay, and then they'll come in and they'll measure everything. Oh, this wheelbase is this, and this is where the seats are, and this is how high off the ground they are. And so that's called a benchmark. Well, you can do the same thing with styling, and this is very, very typical of automotive students and the automotive industry. You'll see these things called trend boards, right? And a trend board is they go out and they collect imagery of stuff, right? Furniture, graphic design, clothing, watches, fashion, whatever it is, houses. And they'll put it up and they'll say, well, this is my customer, this is who I'm going to design for, and this is all the stuff they like, right? And it's a visual benchmark for you to reference when you start doing the styling for the thing you're designing. So the easiest and the smartest thing to do is build upon the history of the prior, you know, designers. Like, everything in your design is probably not absolutely completely new to the world. You know, there's going to be something at least similar to it that's already been done. And more likely than not, there's something similar that's been done well. And so you can have a dialogue, and usually if you just have written words, here's my brief, it says my product needs to be sporty and rugged. It's like, well, what the hell is sporty and rugged, right? So what you do, the first thing that's the easiest and requires the least amount of effort, is you take those words and you try to turn them into images of pre-existing products, right? And it could be artwork you're pulling, it could be photography, it could be whatever. And so you could say, well, okay, I'm going to go away and I'm going to pull a bunch of images, and I'm then going to come back to you and make sure that these images of existing stuff, right, match the terms that you've given me for my design brief. Because what you might even find is that the terms that are in your design brief are contradictory, right? Like, it's got to be, let's see, try to think of a good one. It's got to be durable and delicate, right? So those two are kind of mutually exclusive, because, you know, something that's durable tends to be quite heavy, made out of really strong materials, which typically are not things that would be delicate, right? So, or you know, so you have to be careful in the terminology in the brief, and a big part of it is actually to start by defining the brief as, you know, as clearly as you can before you start working. So what you do is you try to find examples that exist already that match these categories. So you can find a stance of a model standing on a runway, and you can take 10 different models, and you can pick the ones that have the best stance, and then you show them to your studio chief or your, whoever you're working for, and they agree or disagree. But as soon as they agree, now you've defined what is a good stance.
Okay, you are explaining it in very, very subtleous and like a structured way, but let's say there are some people that just don't work yet, and they just want to actually work on their design sense language, I would say. What would you recommend for them to actually do? Is just looking at the trendy stuff and try to compare it if they don't really have anyone to actually talk to about it? How should they actually develop their design sense and design skills on their own? What's your recommendation for that kind of people?
Well, this is really hard, to be honest.
I know, it's really hard.
Because this is, okay, and this is the value of a school, and it's the value of a community, right? Mm-hmm. Because you can go do stuff all day long, whether you're designing a car, characters, environments, architecture, whatever it is, graphic design, but until you qualify it with a group of peers, you won't expand and build your own sense of style and taste, because that's really what it comes down to. It comes down to experience. Mm-hmm. And knowing how to create the form language that matches the request that you've been given. And that comes through mileage, but it also comes through having groups of people critique your work. When you are trying to make an attempt, okay, by writing your own brief, for instance, because you're off on your own in rural countryside of Oregon or something, and you did a car design, and it was just something you made up, but you did have an intent. It was supposed to be sporty and fast and aerodynamic and high performance. So you did have some descriptions you were trying to work towards. But until a group of your peers looks at that with your intended goal in mind and critiques it, you don't really start to build an inner voice and an inner dialogue that later helps you in your own studio when you're alone and it's late at night and you're looking at the quality of the work. And you're trying to decide, am I going the right direction or am I not going the right direction, right? Mm-hmm. Do I need to stop and change gears and go the other way? And the only way you can do that is to develop a critical eye for your own work. But the only way you do that is exposure from a community, right? Talking about your own work in a critical way. And when you do that, you have to divide yourself or divorce yourself from the work and, welcome that criticism. So I think that's why your community is so strong, right? And why it's so important is to have those sorts of people to do that.
Yeah. So in other words, join Level Up and buy Scott's books. Online.
Yeah. And one last thing, because it's the internet, I would say beware of the trolls. So
that's exactly what I wanted to say.
Not all criticism is good criticism. So you have to consider the source, right?
Yeah.
So
people love a good drama.
Yeah, if somebody's giving you a really bad crit because they're jealous of how good your work is, right? You need to understand that. So you have to sort of qualify it and look at their work in order to decide, do I want to trust their critique?
Yeah, that's true.
So, just beware, not all criticism is correct. And because of it's something very subjective, you have to understand cultural differences as well. And you have to understand the person that's critiquing it. And you have to try and change your point of view. If you can try and change your point of view, change your perspective, let's say, not literally, but in context of your work and criticism, you can start to appreciate how they're critiquing your work. So it's kind of like I won't say it's not an out-of-body experience, but it's more of a practice of trying to see the world through someone else's eyes. And this is very much a common thing we do in industrial design because we're almost always designing something for somebody else. Yeah. So you're almost always when you're trying to create something, you're trying to put be in the position of looking at everything that research told you that person likes, and you're trying to invent something that they would also like, right? Even though, you may not like it at all. And through that practice of doing that, you start to be able to understand somebody else's point of view. And when you can do that, you can actually separate yourself from your work and see it through their eyes and understand why they don't like something or why they do like something. And sometimes it'll be simple, right? Sometimes it'll be, oh, if I make it shiny red, they're going to love it. Right? So, okay, so I'll make it shiny red. So, because what you'll find is that somebody may not like the thing that you've designed, and you're thinking, oh, it's the shape, it's the proportion, it's all these things, and it turns out it's just the color. So all you had to do was change the color, right? And they would have loved it.
What you get from school, let's say art center, is that you have the best possible, let's say, critiques that you can get, and you're sure you can trust them, basically, because all these people that are teaching there are successful designers, and you can trust it to the point you don't really have to do all this validation, let's say, of the critique.
Correct.
But knowing that, most of the people that are watching us do not attend art center, and they are probably mostly relying on the internet based communities like Level Up or Brainstorm, and these communities are driven by the people of internet, which can be
the people of internet. Like it's a breed.
Exactly.
Well, it kind of is sometimes, I guess.
Yeah. So what I was going to ask is, knowing that we have to look for the critiques on these communities, how do you? I think you have answered that. You have to go through that validation in order to.
If you're on the internet, you just have to. It's part of your due diligence is to qualify the people that are critiquing your work.
Exactly.
But this is why physical schools and groups of experts that gather together to put together an educational program, why it still has so much value.
Right.
Yes, you get the information out of the book, but now what are you going to do with it? Right? The next step is, how do I know I'm doing it right? And yes, Level Up and Brainstorm and the internet is your free, immediate, best way to do it. Beyond that, if you happen to be in a city where there are working professionals, you try to network with them, because there are a lot of other, you just have to find a good mentor. You don't have to, be at a school, but that's what the school provides. It provides a community of like-minded individuals that are all pre-qualified by the admissions person, saying that, okay, you group of people are all like-minded, you all have advanced skills, you can all trust each other in the classroom. And then on top of that, we're going to give you this amazing faculty member who has a fantastic resume and works in a professional setting where their own work is critiqued on a daily basis. We're signing off on that person as a trusted, person to critique your work and guide you. So I think that's where, it's pretty hard to beat a community like that if you're trying to make this discipline your career.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why probably it's so expensive, which is also kind of bounding. It's
yeah, but that said, just like there are always good jobs for people with good skills, there are always great scholarships for, again, students who really need the help and have put in the level of practice and effort to present a portfolio and get a scholarship. I mean, when I was
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I was chair at Art Center for entertainment design, and we had this one kid who had great skills, and we had offered a half tuition scholarship, but it wasn't enough to get the kid. He still couldn't afford it, and so we said, all right, we'll give him a full ride. So it was Art Center for free.
Wow.
So guys, you can do that.
It can happen. It can happen. But if you're trying to make it the next 50, 60 years of your life, I think it's a worthwhile pursuit. You shouldn't not try. You shouldn't let the financials be a reason not to try.
Yeah.
That's a great point. I think that pretty much covers our question. I think we have given a pretty extended answer to that.
I think I covered a whole lot of them there, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Function, that sort of thing.
Well, let me just get into the next one, the second most upvoted one, because it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more technical. So this one is, Scott, what exercises would you recommend to help instill proper perspective skills?
I mean, I think it starts at the beginning, right? I mean, perspective is really just two things. It's the knowledge, of where to put the points, and then it's the ability to connect those points. So, and that's really, really simplified, but at the end of the day, that's kind of what it is. It's knowledge and understanding first, and then it's hand practice, right, and mileage second. So I think you just have to go sequential, right? Like in How to Draw, we tried to lay it out sequentially, that you just start with a simple practicing straight lines, and by the end, you're drawing really complicated things. But each step on its own is pretty simple. But you can't go to the next one until you master the previous one. So if you're getting in trouble, you're probably jumping ahead too far, which everybody does, and I did as well, and everybody will continue to do that. But when you really want to nail the skills and master something, you have to take a step back. You have to go a little slower, and give it a little bit more focus.
Okay.
There you go. So I think in practice, the great way to actually build those skills would be how to draw a book, because it really breaks it down into really manageable steps. Like Scott just said, breaking it down into manageable steps is the most important step to understanding it all and slowly getting this knowledge. So yeah, how to draw a book and Gnomon videos you have created as well. I think that's where I have learned.
And we have another perspective drawing book coming out in the fall.
That's amazing.
By the author who did Framed Ink.
Oh, great! Yeah.
In that storyboarding book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Drawing composition and storyboarding book, Marcos. He is now a perspective drawing book. It's 300 pages.
Wow.
And there's some overlap with our two books, but it's more like they build on each other. So we do have more knowledge on the way.
Can't wait for that. Yeah. Okay. Next question. So, what do you think is the best way to break into the industry these days? And the industry isn't really specified in the question, but let's say the concept design industry.
Well, I think it's probably all the same answer, no matter what industry you're in.
Okay.
Back to another reason you spend a lot of money for a school is you're buying into the network, right?
Yeah.
And so if you go someplace where everybody speaks the same language, they've all learned from the same teachers, and they're looking to hire other people out of that same environment, once they get out and they're studio chiefs, they go back to where they went to school, for instance. So doesn't mean you can't break in, but one of the best ways is to join the network, right? It's to be like lawyers going to Harvard, right, or Yale, and then the law firms are all looking to those schools when they need to hire their next young lawyer. They go back to where they went to school. So it's the most common way, no matter what department you're in or what discipline, is that those people doing the hiring look back to hire like-minded people with a skill set that they can trust and that they know that those people have, and that comes out of a school. Now, nowadays, though, if you don't come out of one of those schools, you're really, really lucky, because in the old days, when there was no internet, right, and I graduated from college, for instance, that was it. You got the interviews that the school helped you set up. That was all you got. And then you had to go cold call with your portfolio to design offices if you wanted to go meet more people. But now you have this awesome thing called the internet, and you can actually post your work, right, someplace like ArtStation, for instance. You could post your portfolio there. You can interact with people. You can get involved with critiquing, all sorts of things. You can share process. I mean, there's these amazing, online communities. Not only you guys through Facebook, but also, where you host your portfolio. Core 77, for instance, if you're a product designer or industrial designer. And so there are ways now to get active. And so I'd say it's all about networking, first and foremost, to introduce yourself, to people. So there are live events, like there was the Gnomon Live that happened a few years ago, or they do them all the time now. And that's where, again, like-minded people, they're not getting together to go to school for an entire year together, but they're getting together for a weekend. And so going to those things, if you're a game designer, GDC, where there's portfolio reviews, there's portfolio reviews at Comic-Con now, and there's all sorts of Comic-Cons around the world. So I think you've got to get online, and you not only have to get online with your good work, you have to have a professional presentation of your work, and then you've got to refine, to be honest, you've got to refine your entire presentation of yourself as well. So if you've got a Facebook page, right, that's, say, open to other people seeing it, open to the public instead of just only your friends, you usually don't want to be, right, drunk, showing party pictures, saying how awesome it was that you got out of work early and you escaped to the concert, and how awesome it was this weekend because you played, World of Warcraft for 3 straight days. Because then if somebody looks you up, right, say, oh, this person's got an amazing portfolio on ArtStation. Oh, who is it? And they just type your name. Or they're in Facebook, and then they find you. They're like, oh, yeah, but they're not really mature enough to work here. So I think you've got to make the decision when you do go online to present everything about who you are. Because if they have 2 people to pick from, and they have equal work, like their portfolios are both strong, and they do an interview in person, or then they do a little bit, they dig a little bit deeper, they're going to want to work with the person that they think is going to add to their corporate culture. So listen, the like 3 days of Medal of Honor or whatever, or Call of Duty, that might be perfect if that's where you want to work. But beyond that, maybe not.
Yeah, that's perfectly how you point out all the features that people need to be somehow like aware of before actually starting doing that. Working into industries is really good. I think it's very valuable and knowledge that you put into. There we have another question that is related to your designs, and I think it's kind of cool because it goes a little bit deeper. How do you come up with ideas for all the complex technical stuff? And what's your preparation for actually designing that?
Well, it would be just like, if you're a figure drawing person, because you usually get the questions most come out of the illustration world for people that are, into drawing more figurative work. It's just like learning anatomy for 10 years before you start to go draw, a beautiful drawing right off the top of your head, without looking at anything. Same sort of thing. You need to go learn the anatomy of whatever you're going to design. So if you're going to go design a car, right, you need to go read a book about packaging and engineering first. If you're going to go design a building, right, you need to learn how things are built. So I think it's, on the one hand, it's just super logical. You've got to go learn about how the thing is made before you can start to innovate and style that object. Of course, you can take like a simplified pass, right? And it's still going to, like you're designing a car, it's still going to look like a car, and you can still make it look super cool, but it's probably not going to be that innovative. So if you want to innovate, you've got to do a little deeper dive. So great places to do that. If you're weak on engineering skills, go to a museum of science and industry, and read all the, go to, like, for instance, if you're on the East Coast of the U.S., you go to the Smithsonian, right? And you'd read about how all the jet engines work. You'd read about all that stuff, and you read books about it as well, and you start to build a base of knowledge. But without the base of knowledge, it's going to be tough to innovate.
Yeah, that's true. It's amazing.
There's another question related to, let's say, innovation. The future of concept art, knowing how far ahead you were in terms of coming up with the techniques of, let's say, Modo, and using Modo's tools to iterate on the designs really quickly. I'm talking about replicators and texture bombing and many different techniques you have developed over the years. What do you think is the future of concept art for you? Like, what is the direction? Where is it going in terms of technique?
let me go to this one. I have some of this stuff. I have this in this slideshow for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'll answer that with this one. I'll just whip through this like 10 minutes.
Go ahead.
Okay. Do I need to share screen?
Yes, it's working.
It's working? Okay. So if my job is to conceptualize new ideas and designs to inspire the future of a company's products, and that's really what I get brought in for more often these days if I do any freelance work, is that I would be brought in to do some concept work for whatever, 2 weeks or 2 months, and supplement the in-house design team. And if I had to do that, right, the big question is how? And so what I would start with, right, is what tools and methods can I employ to get this job done? And this will lead back as an answer at the end about where do I think things are going. So, you know, let me explain the stuff where we've been first.
Sure.
Okay, what have creative people done? How have creative people done this before? Odds are you're not the first person, you know, to design or draw or illustrate something. You know, you may be, but odds are it's still going to be like something else. So in that case, you need to do some research. Just like you can research engineering, you can also research tools and thought processes and how creative people have done their problem solving in the past. So that's what this is about. So in order to explain this, I'm going to start here with a very, very brief history of visual communication. So in the beginning, I need that better, that trailer voice. In the beginning. So these are the original concept guys, right? The original creature designers, right? Because you can tell those are some strange looking buffalo. So these are cave paintings. I think they're in south of France, maybe. They're like 30 to 40,000 years ago. And you can see that actually looks a lot like, you know, watercolor and pencil sketches of today. Same with this. This is not that old now, but if we go from this to this, which is like, you know, early last century, not much changed. So over about, let's say, 35,000 years, almost nothing changed, except now we understand perspective. So the architects, this is Frank Lloyd Wright, but it's still pigment on the surface, right? Nothing has changed. It could have been on a cave wall. Same here, right? So still pigment, but now we know structure. We know how to cast shadows, and we know perspective. So our ability to depict an imaginary world has greatly improved. We can apply that to cars. We understand reflections. We start to know how to model form. Raymond Loewy. And then that's some of my stuff, traditional media, markers, gouache. So that's kind of the past. And we say almost no change for, you know, 30, 40,000 years. And then today. Well, I say today, but this is like this is 15 years ago, let's say. 15 years ago, Photoshop really started becoming a functional tool to do the same sort of things we used to do when we were cave people, we can now do with Photoshop. It's easier, it's faster. We go from a brush sketch to a Photoshop rendering, right? Very much still what effectively cave painting, but with different tools. So we go traditional to digital, still Photoshop, more refined, maybe, you know, understanding of reflectivity, casting shadows, form. Now we're starting to actually do a lot more, you know, exploring styles and variety of styles, form languages, working, but it's still traditional, right? Sketch in the upper left to Photoshop below, with the exception of some 3D modeled and rendered wheels. So where do we go tomorrow? And tomorrow I'm saying is like, say, like the last 5 years. 3D. So this is 3D only with some photography in the foreground and a little bit of Photoshop for the mist, but no 2D work. Again, no 2D work, traditional 2D work, I should say. But to make a 2D image using 3D tools, whereas in the old days, right, this would have all been painted back in the cave days. And then now this is all 3D. And now starting things are becoming much more photographic.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas when you're using watercolor, it's very, very difficult with traditional media to make it look photographic. You have to put in a lot of labor. But typically projects are so fast, you don't have that sort of time. So these new tools allow you to work photographically much, much faster. So that's 3D plus a little 2D. And now with the advent of photography being super cheap over the last 5 years, 10 years, going to digital, now there's no cost involved with, you know, developing your film. And it's already in digital format, so you can paint over the top of it very, very easily. And now we have things like photo booth, and I can just go out and walk along the beach, and these are pieces of driftwood, and I can find, you know, a girlfriend and a boyfriend, right, just lying on the beach. And then you can paint over them, and you can create, you know, more interesting and imaginative content, starting from a different place. So that starts from a photograph, and then, you know, use drawing, using your foundation skills, basically. Start to increase material, or indicate materials, show form with value, play with color, you know, all of that sort of stuff you can start to do with good foundation skills. There's another one, starts with a photograph, and then paint right over the top. And if you go back, watch the head of this little character, or the knee at the back, you'll see that they are the same, especially the knee. Doesn't even change. So, whoops. Okay, so this is an abstract piece of photography. And when I saw this, I saw a distant horizon. I saw like a little jet trail here in the foreground, and then, you know, 20 minutes of painting, and there's your little 2 ships returning to some sort of architecture off on that ridge in the distance. And that's the sort of thing you would do with custom brushes and recrop the image, but a super fast sketch. But again, done with digital tools. And now using 3D to actually explore different compositions even. So I'm setting up in Modo using sliders and setting up an animation. In each frame, I just move around my sliders to move the elements of my scene. So if, say, I decide with a production designer or director, this is where our scene's going to take place, right? This is our set. But I want to explore some different compositions of scale, let's say, and epic grandeur. Could I just do it by almost a happy accident? Could I set up an algorithm to move the elements around for me while I'm off having lunch? And then I could come back and I could have these images to show and say, well, that's probably too much, but that's kind of interesting. Yeah, but maybe I like it scaled back. So now I get all that stuff for free. So it's helping to aid part of my process.
I believe there is a whole talk on these sources of inspiration. That's, I think, how it's called.
Yeah, it touches on this stuff. And then there's my raw render. And then you apply your foundation skills over the top to add some more texture, add some wind, some blowing dust, right? And now this starts to hint that there's life, because this thing's obviously got smoke coming out of it, or steam, one or the other.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
So, you know, this is kind of where I think tomorrow's at. These are new tools, right? Not new in the context, they've been around for several years, but they're getting so fast and so easy to use. There's no excuse, you know, to not learn these additional tool sets. 3D plus Photoshop. There's using 2D skills. So this is custom brushes in Photoshop overlaid onto a 3D model. It makes part of the 3D model transparent. So all the modeling in that bridge, which looks super complex, is just making the black areas opaque and the white areas transparent. So it's just 2 bent tubes in my 3D model with a flat bottom. That's how fast the model is to make. And then all that complexity, visual complexity, comes out of 2D, not modeling. So there are ways to get creative with the new tools, like the replicator suits you mentioned. So again, I get lots and lots of variations while I'm at home sleeping. I come in the next day, and I've got all these different variations, arranging the component pieces. And then I'll mix and match them, throw them together in Photoshop, erase certain parts, keep certain parts. And something like this, I wouldn't have tried to do in Photoshop in the past because it's too labor intensive. So I can actually start to explore different materials, translucency, reflectivity, things of that nature. Whereas in the past, if somebody asked me for this, I would just say, no, you can't do that. Because I didn't want to try and render it in Photoshop. It's going to take way too long.
Yeah.
So, but now we can explore those things.
Yeah,
There's
there are
an
the
abstract
people.
image. Yeah, go ahead.
There are the people that are just maybe a little bit confused right now. I really love the way that you show us how it all evolved, and it all comes to one place that we started in the cave, actually, right? But there are some people that think that after this talk, you are just giving us the idea that 2D is dying, but I, of course, don't agree with it, because you keep telling that you have to have the foundation, and the foundation is actually just sketching and having that knowledge of 2D behind you, right? So the people
Correct.
just
Yeah.
just thinking that 2D is dying is just definitely not true. So maybe if you can just tell them, what you think right now, because I think that people sometimes are just getting confused with you saying that, oh, I wouldn't do it in 2D, so I just trying to implement more 3D and stuff. How would you just, tell them that it's like, no, we have to have the foundation first to be able
thing
to.
is, yeah, that all of my 3D images are becoming 2D in the end, right?
Yeah.
So if I don't know how reflection works, for instance, I can't stage my scene to put the reflection on that guy's helmet where I want it. That's foundation knowledge, right? That's knowledge of physics. And I only get that from having done, right, a lot of study trying to do 2D work. It's maybe not the greatest example, because you could do that through, being a good photographer as well. But if we go more to the drawing side, I can't, if I don't understand perspective, for instance, let's go back here. I can't extend a scene. So like this scene, for instance. Exactly. If I wanted to add something to it, which there's a lot been added here. There's a lot of struts that have been added. The buildings in the back have been added, right? Those are all 2D that have been painted in Photoshop. If I don't know how to draw in perspective, I can't add to this in a convincing, realistic way. It's not possible. I can't figure out the foreshortening of those vertical struts in the distance and know how big they should be here in the foreground. Same with that car back there on top of the hill. There's a tiny little car back there in third place. If I wanted to bring that forward into perspective and draw it in the foreground, right, I wouldn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
So same goes with these environments, right? If I want to add a person in the foreground, a person standing over there on one of those structures, I wouldn't know how to do that. I also wouldn't know how to figure out where's the horizon and add elements to this. I wouldn't know how to put the scum on the water, right? See the scum on there, the foam, here it is without, okay? If I want to add to this, because right now it looks very sterile, right? And this is straight out of the CG render. But if I want to give it more life and texture, and I want to put that foamy scuzz on the water in the oil slick, how do I foreshorten it so it looks like it's sitting on the water instead of tipping off of that water plane? And that all comes from 2D drawing and perspective.
Yeah, that's true.
The people I've seen use 3D tools the best happen to also be the people that know how to build the best traditional models and also draw and paint with traditional media. So I think, yes, you can go and be proficient with 3D only. You could actually go get a job and do 3D only. But if you want to have more options, right, and be able to pick and choose your jobs and work on a more, a larger range of jobs, you want to have both. Because the people that are the best have both. And those are the people you want to compete with. So it's not a question of like one or the other, or is one obsoleting the other? No, it's just we have new tools, and you got to go learn more stuff.
Yeah, it's how you balance those out once the brief arrives, and now we have to decide which tool gets you there. Yeah,
and it's usually a combination of tools. Right? It's usually maybe, I would say where I find that 3D is probably faster now because I understand perspective, I understand camera lenses. I can jump into a 3D program and say, oh, I want this kind of wide angle lens, or I want a long lens perspective. I can set up my grid. I can block out some proportions. I can pick the angle. I can show it to somebody, the blocking out, getting the point of view just right. Then I can take a screen grab, or I can just do a quick super fast render, and now I go back to 2D, and I print that out, and I go to my desk, and I start drawing over the top.
Yeah.
Because the amount of time it would take me to go in and draw or model all the details versus throwing photography on there and photo bashing it and trying to put all that photography into perspective, right, would be so much faster. So it's a blend. It's back and forth, back and forth.
Awesome.
And a lot of times it'll start 2D, like thumbnail sketches on a Post-it or something, right, or a napkin. They'll be super scruffy, not something you would ever show anybody except maybe another designer. And then you would go block something out fast in 3D. Then you would print it, then you go draw back over the top. Maybe even make a nice line drawing, and then go back into Photoshop, render part of it in Photoshop, like all the cut lines and things, and then maybe bring some other 3D elements, like if I was doing a car, I might bring the wheels back, right? And so I think the lines have become very, very blurry between photography, Photoshop, 3D rendering, 3D modeling, and traditional drawing.
Exactly, and I think it's really important to note that we here are really talking about concept design. I know there are a lot of people that are illustrators and maybe trying to be illustrators when watching these sessions right now, and I think it's a different field, and there is a misconception that these two, of course, they overlap, but
they overlap, yes.
Yeah, but they are not the same thing, and
no.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you can elaborate on that.
Well, classically, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but they all comes from the same point, right? You can't really just do a good photo bash using 3D as well and all that stuff if you don't have that foundation that you keep talking about it all the time, because you just can't. You skip, like you say, you just go straight to 3D, and you skip all those parts with having perspective and all this stuff, because you know that you can actually do it in 3D. You don't need to prepare your grid or whatever, because you can feel it. And how do you do it is actually because you know it and you learn it. It's not like you just skip it because you can't do it.
Yeah. The thing is that I can always work better in 3D if I've done a little thumbnail sketch, even if it's scruffy and I'm totally guessing at the perspective. But if I work first on paper with writing, right, with words, saying like, this is my direction, this is my goal, this is my intent for my outcome, and then I actually try to thumbnail out some solutions. If I have those in front of me when I jump into a 3D program, I'm so much more effective, and I don't burn hours wasting time inside the computer. Yes. So I think that writing and drawing is still the fastest and most efficient way to think. And if you only use it and retain it for that, that's totally fine. Because you can get so much done in a 3D program, but if you're trying to wing it and do it simultaneously, it's very difficult. I've seen people have much stronger results when they enter a program with intent, like they know where they're going, and they've already built it, right? And if you draw well, you've already built the model in perspective, so you already know there are no surprises when you start building it in 3D. You're so much faster.
I remember you mentioning, because knowing how overwhelmingly complicated 3D programs can be for the people that know maybe only how to use a pencil and know basic fundamental knowledge on perspective and so on, knowing that these are really complicated programs, you have mentioned, I think in one of the talks I have seen before, how do you start to learn these? I think you had a quote that you just go there with an intent to do just one thing, not to learn the whole everything, every taskbar and every window.
Yeah. I think that the best way to learn those new tools and new programs is to not try and create something cool, right? So the most frustrating thing, like you see how all the amazing people using the programs, right? Like if I look at Neville Page using ZBrush or something, like, oh hell yeah, I want to do ZBrush because look at that, I can make that. That's so cool. And I jump in and I try it, and I'm trying to make something really, really cool instead of taking all the pressure off of myself and not worrying about trying to create something amazing, and just trying to focus on understanding and getting, accustomed to how the process needs to work in that new tool. And I think that if you want to be successful and actually master a tool, you take the pressure off and you don't try to create cool stuff. You try to, you try to create something really, really basic. And then, of course, you're a designer, an artist, you'll immediately start to see how the tools could be used creatively. But you've got to really sort of separate yourself from the expectation. And it's good to give yourself appropriate amount of time, too. Say, well, I'm going to give myself 2 weeks. I'm going to put in, like, whatever, 10 2-hour sessions trying to learn this new tool. And then find a good tutorial and just go step by step. The cool stuff will happen, but not if you don't become proficient at the tool. It's just like drawing. And and the other thing, I'll go back to the illustration versus design discussion.
Sure.
I did do a tutorial on that somewhere, design versus illustration. Because designers use illustrations to communicate what they want to go build. And illustrators, for the most part, if you're really a classic illustrator and a classic definition of it, you're creating 2D work, and the end illustration is the product. So I think that where the confusion comes sometimes is people aren't using the terms properly. Yes, there's overlap, but if you're designing something that gets built, I really see that more as the realm of industrial design. If your final product is a two-dimensional image, I see that as the realm of illustration, meaning that's the thing you're gonna go sell for an ad campaign, for a graphic, for anything else, but a storybook, for instance. But if you're intending it for it to be lit and built, whether it's CG animation or physical, then you really need to know how to build things. And that's kind of I see as like the big difference.
Yeah, that's a great point to have.
Most illustrations for designers get thrown out, right? They just get pitched at the end of the project, and that's why I don't consider it art. It's never meant to be shown as art. It looks nice, it communicates well because it has to, and a lot of people demand that it be photographic now. But at the end of the day, when the actual physical object is done, whether it's a CG game or anything, that other stuff was just a means to get you there, and it gets just trashed.
Yeah, that's the usual production pipeline in many studios. Every studio that is producing a game or CG animation, or the outcome is pretty much compressed into a video or a game or a movie, and yeah, exactly what you said. All these things are being squeezed into the pipeline, and you don't really get to see all of that. These are getting released in the art book. Yeah, you see it in the art book, but even then, production art is not really great looking, right? Production art is cut and paste. It's as fast as you can possibly work, and you just need to do what communicates an idea. And it's not stuff that even looks great in a book. Sometimes look at the art of books and you look at the work, you're like, man, that looks awful, right? And it's like, well, yeah, because it didn't need to look good. It's not the finished piece. The finished piece is what they do with it.
Yeah, but it makes sense.
It resolved the problem that the art director or the project had at the time. So that was the most important thing it did.
Let's figure out some new, find some new questions here. I think we did pretty good on the top 10 probably.
Yeah, there's one that is a little bit more about motivation and what do you do to stay sharp, keep up, and keep improving on your skills. So about a drive, I would say. What's behind it? Yeah.
Well, I think first and foremost, I think that the most successful sort of artists and designers work from a place of curiosity, meaning not that they're curious people. I mean, they are curious people, not just curious looking, but they're curious people by nature, and they want to learn. And so if you're curious, it's a great way to start, right? Like, you're curious enough to get out of your apartment and go to a museum, look at artwork, read a book. That's kind of, nothing else kind of happens unless you have that curiosity. So I think you have to start there. And if you're not curious about it, it means you probably don't care about it. And if you don't care about it, it's probably not what you should be doing. So I think you have to find something you're curious about. Mm-hmm. And then once you do, I think you have to join a community. And once you join a community, then there are people that will help you to get motivated, to excel and advance your skills. And I was always into sports. You know, I was rowing and I did lots of sports in high school, and so I had sort of a competitive nature. that way, which I think really came a lot from that. And so I always end up sort of drawing parallels to athletics and being competitive in whatever do something. You can play chess, you can do whatever, but if you need a little bit of competitive spirit, and if you put curiosity with competitive spirit, you can quickly end up being quite self-motivated and being quite determined, to do a better job than the person that's sitting next to you. And typically with that mentality, you tend to, advance your skills pretty quickly. So if you don't have that, first you got to find the curiosity. Second, I think a community can help to elevate maybe your competitive nature, or be with at least a group of like-minded individuals.
Yeah, that's so important, because knowing how many different routes you can take, even in the concept design field, a lot of the people that are starting out are feeling a little bit overwhelmed. You can do product design, you can do vehicles, you can do all sorts of different things. We specialize to a certain point. And it's really, really possible that the person that wants to enter the industry will specialize in a certain field, and suddenly you want to be in the industry, you want to create things, but you're not really sure what is it. So it's a great point to have that you have to find this natural curiosity into some of these directions, and then it becomes natural for you to progress and to find new resources, and knowledge out there becomes really natural.
And
that's what.
Be patient. It takes time. I spent 2.5 years at Oregon State University before I went to Art Center, and I tried as many different subjects as I could to see if there's anything I liked more than what Art Center looked like it could offer me. And there were some subjects I liked, but nothing I liked more. So I sort of felt much more comfortable and confident about pursuing that goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we just talked a lot about the curiosity, but you also took up the nice subject in terms of sports that really keeps you going in terms of health, right? Oh, I think we just lost him.
Okay, Dark, can you? Okay, I will write to Scott on.
Yeah, okay. Jonas, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
You're sleeping?
No. It's morning time for me, so I just slept. So I'm not sleeping.
Okay.
I have written Scott.
Okay, let's wait for it.
Looks like some kind of a crash or something. I hope he will be back in a minute. We still have, I think, 20 minutes, and still can cover a couple of questions. Yeah, this was amazing so far. Really packed and.
Man,
Yeah.
this is the session that is really worth watching a couple of times, actually, to us
Yeah.
adapt to the knowledge. It's crazy.
Okay. Okay, he read my message, so I think he will be rejoining just now. There you go.
Yep, there we go.
Someone posted he left like a boss.
Just left. Okay, we have you back.
Shut the door.
Okay, good to have you back. So I think that finished this question we had. Let's get a new one. So what do you do to build your visual library? I think we kind of explained it, but I think we can try it again.
I think I have a video on that. There's a visual language. I think it's a 3-part video. It's either 2 or 3-part. So I think if you go to that on my YouTube channel, I think there's a good, because it's a there's like many steps, to building that, and also how you want to apply that. It's not just build it and then you need to think about your application as well.
Exactly. So guys, go check it out. Darek can find it right now for you and post it to the Facebook event page if you want to find it after the session. And I will get another question, which is, okay, so knowing how busy you are right now with, managing a design studio press and workshops and your own private projects, is there any time management system, or how do you keep being focused on all these things and still be productive and finish these? Like, is there anything?
Well, I mean, one, right now I'm actually not that busy, finally. So I finally have it all down to like just one job right now. But in the past, I used to always have like 5. So last summer I hired someone at Design Studio Press. There's a team of 4 people. I only check in twice a week with them now, so that's great. And that's a lot. And then I stopped doing all my other activities. So I stopped freelance, I stopped books, I stopped workshops, and so I'm now just working on one project, which is top secret. Maybe we'll be ready to reveal what it is by the end of this year, I hope. But in the past, when I was doing all those different activities at the same time that you mentioned, it's difficult. You've got to have a good list. I think a list is fantastic, so a checklist. And then you have to have set in place a few, like your own time management policies. So a friend of mine who's a producer of movies and TV shows, he has a thing where he won't go home unless he's answered every email. And even if it's just to say, I don't have time to get to this today, I'll try to get to it in the morning, he still answers every email before he goes home. And so, and his job is about communication for the most part. And so that's a way that he stays, really sharp, is just by having a rule, right? My rule right now is I got to go for a good bike ride 3 days a week. Okay, so that's how I stay healthy. And I've got a goal of 150 rides this year, and I want to, go over whatever, how many thousands of miles. And so you can just set up your own little structure. But make them realistic goals. And the way you get stuff done is that if you're getting a paycheck, right, typically those jobs are the easiest to do. Because somebody else is relying on you, you're getting paid for the job, you don't get paid unless you do the work, you don't keep the job unless you do good work, right? And you know what sort of ramifications that has to your lifestyle or your family and where you're living, etc. So those are usually pretty easy to stay motivated working for other people. But balance is good.
That totally answers that. And let me see. I think this can wrap up the Q&A part, since the questions I see here are, I think we have answered them before, and right now it will be just going, and we have answered them, along the way, talking about all these things we have talked about. So what I thought will be really cool to see is the presentation you have prepared for us. There's one you have showed already, but and I think there are 2 remaining that we can choose from. Maybe you want to show us one of these. You already know what's what our audience is curious about, so maybe there's something that will be more suitable for the topics we have tackled today.
I think probably the styling one.
Mm-hmm.
And Scott, you have to reshare your screen because it stopped when you dropped out. So.
Okay.
Yep. There you go.
All right. Let's see. I had the case study one, but I think, let me just cover in just 2 seconds something here without pictures, because I couldn't show the pictures, so I took them out. But after I took out the images, as something I did for Tonka, this is about style and building a farm language. So I just want to run through the steps, even without the images. This finishes up that idea about curiosity. So when you have curiosity, it's very natural to go and investigate. Okay, so this would be my design path, basically, whether I was doing an illustration or designing a toy. So I would get curious about something, and the curious thing would be either dictated to me in a brief. As a company, we're curious about this, right? Okay, that's my direction. Now I'm going to go do some investigation, which, also call that research. Then you're going to turn that into action. that can be called research and development, right? So in this case, for this project, which unfortunately I can't show pictures, but I can talk about, what makes a Tonka, right? And so I needed to first to get curious about that, do some investigation. So research and then develop, or investigate and formulate. So based on my investigation of the future direction of your styling for kids, I think you should do these things. I'm going to formulate some solutions. And then I'm going to show them those solutions, and I'm just calling it demonstrate, but you can do that with 2D imagery. You could, if you're in the engineering department, you can make a functional 3D model, say, look how this works, right? So you have to show that to other people, which basically means you need to communicate. And when you communicate, you can use your visual communication skills, photography, sculpture, any of that, or all of it. And you establish a design direction based on that demonstration and that critique. And then what you do is you build on that foundation. So you said, oh, I think this is the trend. Here's some examples of what I think your product could look like based on these trends. That establishes a form language or a foundation for us to build on. So now we could build the entire brand DNA, let's say, based on certain elements. And then the circle of refinement is just this. You refine it and repeat. Refine, repeat, refine, repeat. And what's in the middle here, where the and is critique. So you do refinements based on your foundation and your direction. You show it to your studio chief or the owner of a company, and then you repeat it and you go back and show it to them again. And then what do you do with it? After you're refining it, you adapt it. And in the case of a brand DNA, you would expand that. And then in the case of the job I do, that would be used to inspire a design team, for instance, or a sales and marketing team, something like that. Okay? And then at the end of the day, if you want to be creative, just go do something. So, right, you can use the Nike logo here, just do it, right? But being creative is the action of creating. So a great way to feel more creative and be more creative is to just start. And don't think about it so much. Like, yes, do the research, understand the anatomy. You have to do that. That's like eating your vegetables, right? But you just have to do it. And then you've got to go and just start. And through the act of starting, you will start to see creative solutions. But if you just sit and think about it too much, oh, I'm not creative, I don't have any ideas, you never will be. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is the opposite. This is a self-fulfilling prophecy of just by starting to do something, you will become more creative.
That is a great piece of advice. I feel like a lot of people really overthink stuff, and they get too caught up in, like, I want to do it right straight away, and I want to, get all the best sources. Like, they want to tackle it properly, but they don't understand that sometimes just doing is actually the right way to do it, and not to overthink it.
They get too hung up, right? And they get too, and it stifles their creativity, because they're just thinking about it too much.
Yeah. Knowing it from my experience, since I think I'm one of these guys who really overthinks stuff, is that there's a lot of fear of, I think, failure, which comes from, I think, thinking too much about what will happen in the future, what may happen in the future, and what you are presenting us here right now is just requires to be present, requires to be in the moment and just doing it. So that's actually way to go, I think. So yeah, I have to stop overthinking, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know if we have time for this big one here.
We have time if you do.
Yeah, all right. Well, we have a few people still left, so
we are still here, man.
Yeah, all right. There's quite a lot of people watching, and I guess there will be plenty watching this afterwards, since it will be up. So
yeah, so let me run through. I'll just run you through this since I have it. It's open here. It's this again. It's this. A way to sort of have a checklist. So I said lists, right? This is my checklist of whenever I design anything, and I base it all on distance I am away from the object. And so, and you can rearrange this, but I try to set it up in a hierarchy. But it doesn't have to be these subjects in this order. right? If you're working on something where material is more color is the most important, put it at the top, okay? But it's a way that you can have, let's call it a critique list. When you're working with an art director or a client, you could say, well, you don't like this version, but why don't you like it? Is it the color? Is it the texture? Is it the transitional forms? Is it the silhouette, right? And by having this, it tries to establish, this list tries to help you establish a common vernacular, right, which is a common language, with two people that might speak different languages. So if I'm trying to pitch this to a CEO who's really worried just about the bottom line in the business or the marketing and the sales, I need to have a way that I can have an educated conversation with that person about styling. And this is what this does for me. Because it helps me just hone in on the things they don't like. And if I can do that, then when I go back and I do the next iteration, I know where to spend my time. Because people can spend all sorts of time going in the absolute wrong direction because of a poor critique. So let me go back and I'll just show you examples of those categories quickly. Okay, so we take this silhouette, proportion, and stance. And so I might spend a lot of time, just ignore the details on this, but these are examples of where the silhouette, proportion, and stance are sort of at the top. So this is all basically matte black, right? That means surface details don't matter, transitional forms don't matter much, there's no strong color graphics, right? So that means as those other things are less visible, because it's all matte black, let's say, that means the other things are more important. That means the silhouette is more important. Like this, it's all white. It's really high contrast. That means I better spend a lot of time making sure the silhouette looks nice. Like this, all white. Whereas compared to the previous one, this actually had what we'll get into in a minute, color graphics, value graphics, the yellow panels. The cut lines and the intersections of those two different colors becomes important because we see them more easily. If I look at this one, I see white on white. Now, the shape where those two things meet doesn't become important. We'll look more at that later. So these are just examples. So this we did for a focus group. This is an old project. And so this one shows silhouette, proportion, and stance. Okay, there's an example. And it was pretty interesting. Even 5-year-old, 6-year-old kids could look at this, right? Actually, I think it was like 8-year-old kids. And they could say, no, this one looks like my 6-year-old brother's car, toy car. I like this one more. And then we had another one that was even more realistic, and they said, no, that's too real. It doesn't look fun. So there are very subtle differences, and this is all about, it's the exact same car. So it's really just proportion, silhouette, and stance. It's the only thing that was changed. Mm-hmm. And then early thumbnail investigations, right, would work. This perspective is basically taken out of it. It's really just overall those three things. So let's look at another project. Those are all past video game things. This is a toy. Let's jump ahead to this. Okay, launch this thing. Okay, so this is the very, very, very first little brush pen sketches with a little bit of value thrown on it in Photoshop, all dropped into the same perspective, and all that's changing is silhouette, proportion, and stance. And I might even show them to the client this quickly and then just jot down which ones they like, because there's a lot of investigation. And when you're doing this exercise, you try to think to yourself, well, I just did this one, could I do the exact opposite? Right? I use that a lot. Like if I just did one that's really angular and pointy, could I do one that was round? And I usually stick with that for a little while until I sort of feel I exhaust that direction. And then I'll pick another direction, like say, oh, I'm just going to use circles. Okay, I did all that, and I don't really have any more ideas about that. Maybe now I'll just use rectangles. Okay, well, now I'll just use triangles. And at the end of a day of sketching, you could have 100 different directions to make your early decisions about which way you want to go. So these are all on that same gate. I sort of think of them as gates. And this is what we did for, actually this is something from Tonka. Not as top secret though. Stance and proportion. And so we have a guide here. On the left would be no, don't do these things. The stuff in the middle is okay. And yes, try to do these things. So when designing any future product, these are the things to look out for. So it's a style guide. Value graphics. Value graphics are areas of an object that are high contrast because of the color and value they're painted, not because of the lighting. So I could see on that motor there that part of it's light, part of it's dark on the white because of lighting, but what I'm talking about is the part that's orange versus the part that's white, or the part that's black. And it could be a hole or it could be painted. So the window creates a value graphic, as does the orange painted areas. So this thing has strong value graphics on the painted ends of the propellers, the holes in the wing, the windows on the fuselage. And if I squint my eyes, those become the most important shapes, because in this environment, the silhouette of the fuselage is pretty low contrast compared to the sky. But look at how high contrast the windows and holes are. So if I want to make this thing more appealing, I'd better spend a lot of time on the shape of those high contrast areas, whether they're holes or they're painted black or it's a window. In the end, it doesn't matter. And if you look at this, it's kind of all over the place, right? We've got this sort of radiused off rectangle. We've got sharper rectangles. We've got circles up there by the cabin. And then we've got a weird cabin shape, and none of those things complement each other. So, it's a little bit, it's a nice example of seeing the high contrast parts, and they're obviously different. Same here, it could be a hole versus a window, but you get the same result. Here's a close-up on that. Here, this car had a really strong light area. It had a white top. It had a dark lower. So I knew that the cut line and the intersection and the relationship between those two areas would be the most visible thing you would see on this design. So the value graphics helped me to prioritize where I spend my effort, whereas low contrast areas, people are going to see second, third, fourth, fifth. This one, it's all basically matte black. That means has low value graphics, right? So the graphics are all very subtle. Dark gray against black, you hardly see them. This one, what we see, and actually in this case, the reflection of my big overhead light box that I set up could actually be the value graphics, right? Do I see the shape of the window? Not very much. I really see the shape of the reflection. So, and do the vent shapes matter? Not really, because I can hardly see them on the carbon fiber and the black vent intake. I see almost no change. But if we make the car white, now all those vent shapes become hypercritical that I better spend a lot of time designing those areas. So that needs to be my effort, right? That's where I put my time into it. Here, vent shapes, not so much. So if you know it's black on black, it's just going to disappear. The graphic shapes of the windows, the vents, pretty forgiving. But if you know you're designing something white with black details, now put your effort into making those things work. So here I'm working with simple value graphics, so it's just a simple silhouette, but then I'm actually darkening windows and vents and holes to try and get those graphics to work. I'm not doing really any sculpting of the form. And that's how I start a lot. Then later I'll go into something like Photoshop and I'll start to actually do the transitional forms after I've got the first two things set up, meaning the first two gates. Same here. Value graphics would be the dark areas versus the red. High contrast, value graphic examples on a toy, for instance. No, okay, yes. So setting up a little style guide. Transitional form I define as value changes you see based on lighting. So that would be light versus dark and the transitions between them. And so cast shadows as well. And the cast shadows, if they're really strong, like this one in the upper right, that could actually, you could call that, and we call those actually shadow graphics as well. It essentially becomes a value graphic. Even though it's a cast shadow and it's there because of the lighting, it's not really a transitional form, it's really a graphic shape. So that becomes important. You have to prioritize where you put your light in order to make that shadow look like a nice, attractive shape because it's so visually strong. So now transitional forms, I'm arranging the lighting. I render in this material a lot, this like matte metallic surface, so I overemphasize the contrast in order to overemphasize the form changes. Same there. Same here, all transitional forms. It's just value change. So light versus dark, dark background against the light top, etc. So you can control that to make one thing stronger than another, make a silhouette strong, make an interior surface strong. More transitional forms. That's a 3D model that I drew over the top, and then I did the transitional forms in Photoshop. That's traditional media. Vellum, that's Photoshop with photographic wheels. But see, look at the transitional forms. It's all just black and white. I work that way a lot, where I try to take color out of the decision-making process, because many objects are offered in multiple colors. So you can't rely on that it's always going to be red, for instance, and people are going to like it because of that. There's a nice example of value change, showing form. Doesn't matter what the subject is. Transitional forms with value, right? That's the way our brains interpret form, is with value change, not color change. Line graphics. Line graphics are things like cut lines, which indicate the way things are assembled. They could also be design lines on a surface. And so they create lines that you need to design. Usually you don't see them, though, until you walk pretty close to an object. And that's why I have them way down on the list. So you can see there are part lines here. We'll see I have some design lines, I think. Look at these lit edges on this toy, right? Glowing edges. Those become strong. So those need to take some, I need to spend some time designing those shapes. Here's some line graphics up around that circular door. Not as important, though, right? Look at the silhouette, much more important, the stance, the proportions. The value graphics of the gold window with the black around it, that's visually much stronger than the actual line graphic. So it's further down my list. So these things are all sort of, as we get closer, you start to see these elements. Here's value and line graphics applied to a basic faceted form. Infographics are these things: the maker of the object, the model name, on-off switches, advertising. So that would be like big, bold stripes, rescue arrow, right? Anything that conveys information. Numbers. Here, the car's got a number on it. It's also a sponsor, right? If I look at that car and I want to make it look attractive and it's going down the track, how important is it for me to sculpt the forms of that car? Not very, because it's so hard for me to see the transitional forms, right? That relies on nice lighting, relies on lots of different things. So if I want to make it look cool, I better have a kick-ass logo that looks good. And I better have a cool-looking number, because that's what you see first. So when doing racing things, the graphics become really important. Look, transitional form on that. Most industrial designers go and spend tons of time on transitional forms and sculpting, and they totally ignore the graphics. But really, in the priority of communicating and what we see first, second, third, the graphics are key. There's numbers, warning stripes, all that little stuff. So there's a whole bunch from there. It's Photoshop with photo elements overlaid on top. Came out of stuff like that, doing visual research. Materials, most things are made in multiple types of materials a lot of times, so you've got to get good at doing material indication. And translucence, for instance, wood grain. Now you're pretty close, right? You're pretty close to the object. You can see through elements. But mixing materials is a really attractive way to work, meaning you can communicate and make the object look much more interesting by mixing your materials. Wood boat, chrome, polished aluminum, chrome and wood and paint all together as carbon fiber. Rusted, weathered surfaces, some scratched surfaces. Last, I always put color way down at the bottom as being not very important, just because this hot rod might be painted in a different color, and I'm not the person who chooses the color. If you're making real products, that might be a sales and marketing department that says, oh, this season it's all about chartreuse green. Then you might be, well, I hate green. It's like, so you can't rely on the color to save the aesthetics of your product. And so I don't give it much priority. It is super important, but it can change a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And usually you're not in control of it. So here's a little color material board done for Tonka. We'll say, okay, at this age group, we think these are the best colors and materials. At this age group, these are the best colors and materials. And at this upper age, we like these. Texture. Now you're so close to the object, you can actually reach out and touch the object. And when you do, it's about that tactile sensation, about whether you're going to be pleasantly surprised when you touch it or not. If it matches up to your expectation. That might be like you walk up to a car and you reach the door handle, and you reach underneath it, and on the outside it looked chrome, but on the backside it was like a soft, nice, textured rubber surface. And you're like, oh, that was unexpected. And so that's another thing you can start to do. So if you think about texture, not just visually, how it looks on the surface, but how it actually feels, then that's sort of the last thing. You've walked all the way up to it, you're actually reaching out, you're touching the object, and this is the tactile feedback. It comes from the texture. In the case of metallics, you might have some speckles in there, some metal flake, which looks nice against the solid color, or the foam on this helmet against the shiny surface of the polycarbonate helmet shell. Lots of weathered surfaces, right? So it also falls under texture.
Yeah.
Chipped, weathered, painted stuff. I classify that as texture as well. I mean, all these are sort of, they all blend together. They all contribute to the whole thing. But having a checklist is really helpful when you're trying to figure out what can I do to make it look better. What I do is I just go back through that list and I say, well, can I improve silhouette, proportion, and stance? Say, well, yes, let's make these changes, or it looks good, so that's not the problem. Put that aside, right? And these categories basically make up pretty much every object. So there's your wrap-up. Those are my 8. Those are usually the order they're in. Sometimes they flip-flop. And then here's a little visual graph. Silhouette, proportion, stance, you can just do straight up black and white, like with a Sharpie on a white piece of paper. Value graphics you could do with gray markers. Now, transitional form, you need to add gradations. Line graphics, right? You need to start thinking about graphic design and thinner lines on whatever's your value. Yeah, infographics, model name, or maker, model name, conveying information, and advertising. Materials, see a whole variety of materials there in those swatches. And then colors, it could be any color in the spectrum. And then texture, right, there's some examples of texture. So that's kind of a visual graph. Then what you can do is you can take that and you can adjust that graph so that you prioritize where you should spend your time. This has very low information graphics. See that on my bar graph, there's just a thin little line. It's because there's no names, there's no maker, there's no model name, there's no text or numbers or advertising on it at all. So infographics are a 0. I don't need to worry about that for this design. But silhouette, proportion, and stance, because it's on a horizontal ground plane and it's dark against light, that becomes really, really strong visually. So I'd better spend a lot of time there. So my bar graph here is on the right, is where I should spend the most amount of time. It's priority of what's important. Value graphics, yeah, pretty important. There's some light areas against dark areas, some black materials, chrome, so materials get a little variety. Color, yeah, there's a range of color because the lighting is warm and the background is cool and the local colors change. Texture, not so much. It's a couple matte surfaces and some chrome, so not that big a deal on that. This one, graph is different. Silhouette, proportion, and stance, way far and above the most important because it's just a blocked out black on black model basically. So until that's right, none of these other things even matter. If it's going to stay like this, say for a video game or a script says it's super dark, all matte black painted surfaces or weathered paint, that means you want to spend all your time here doing silhouette, proportion, and stance. The rest of it, if you go off and do a whole bunch of infographics and logos, it's not going to matter because they're not even going to be on this thing. And that's it. I think that's actually that was fast. That's usually like a 1-hour lecture. 15 minutes.
intense.
Yeah.
Amazing, really. Eye-opening in certain places. Totally.
Definitely worth repeating it and rewatching it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was amazing.
Maybe I'll leave it on
Thanks a
that.
lot.
People can write that one down, or screen grab it.
Yeah,
whatever
I
they
think
like.
that they are doing screen caps right now, so.
Yeah, that's what's happening in the chat right now. Thank you so much for going through that last
sure.
presentation. That was really amazing. And
Forgot
I
one
think,
question.
yeah, we have one last question to you, which will be really easy to answer, and we can wrap
Oh, I
up.
think
So
I know
yeah.
it. You guys need to change your question because I watched a couple other ones and now I know what it is.
But
Billionaire.
that, you know, you are. I don't think there were any another guests that expected this question. So, see,
Glad you read
like, exactly. That's what it is. The most prepared guest in the history of Level Up. Not surprised by a question at all. So
my answer would be billionaire instead of Godzilla.
Okay.
there
You want to
you
ask the
go.
question now?
Not at all. I think
I
you
guess
nailed
it's not
it.
necessary anymore.
Oh,
Yeah.
No.
and you want to ask why then?
Yes.
Ah.
Let's hear it.
It's going to sound like corny, but you could do a lot of good for the world with $1 billion versus all the damage you'd probably do just walking around as Godzilla.
There
So
we go.
I probably got to I like to think, and that's why I do so much free education over the years. So I think that I like to help do my part. So I think that that'd be a good way to start.
That is very good. I was expecting something different. That's good, yes.
Yeah, thinking about the functionality of Godzilla versus Billionaire, right? Yeah, $1 billion is definitely more functional than
I
Godzilla
think that
most of
he
the
would
Yeah,
time.
because
say design
you know,
his own Godzilla.
yeah, because I like to give away a lot of stuff. The only thing I've had to give away pretty much is time. So I do the free tutorial Fridays and things. But I love all these billionaires and guys that are giving away half their fortunes, like Gates and Zuckerberg and those guys. It's quite inspirational.
Exactly. So
Nice.
we are really, really happy and honored that you devoted these 2 hours, 2.5 hours actually, for us today. I am sure people will appreciate it, and they do right now, seeing the chat. So that was a tremendously great experience to see all that. So thanks a lot from the Level Up community and all the people that will watch it. Guys, make sure to go buy Scott's books if you haven't already. These are classics, and make sure to follow him on his social channels like Instagram. It's Caro5, and Twitter as well, and Facebook page, profile, and yeah,
YouTube,
make sure to
of course, check out all.
and the YouTube channel.
Yeah,
Exactly, that's a gold mine.
Apologize, I'm not that active nowadays because I'm in top secret lab mode right now. But there'll be a lot of cool, fun stuff coming within, hopefully by the end.
Cooking something epic again.
Yeah, but all these videos are there for you to
Yeah.
watch. Really, really precious. So yeah, thank you so much again.
Yeah, thanks,
and
guys.
Thanks, man.
that was really amazing.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
All right, so I guess we can wrap it up, and we'll see you guys probably next time. So thanks again to Scott. Thanks to everyone for watching, and yeah, take care, everyone.
I'm waving
See you
goodbye.
guys next time.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.